I was listening to a podcast with someone I met through powerlifting. His name is Frankie Papuolo. I'm pretty sure he's been a musician his whole life. He's played in a number of very successful bands like Death Before Dishonor, Wisdom in Chains, and I believe he played in Walls of Jericho because at the time he was married to somebody in the band. So I listened to a podcast that he was on. Basically, somebody was interviewing him in regards to his career in the music industry, but he's also a powerlifter too. And Frankie's super cool. I would consider him a friend. The things that he can do with a padlock and a beer bottle are unparalleled. If you want to know further, you can ask him about that. But in his podcast, he was talking about passion, and what I took from it was passion, his passion for music and how he got started. And he really drives home how important passion is. Passion is definitely a cornerstone, a foundation if you want to be good at something or have longevity with something. I took two things away from this. One of them was, the first thing that really stood out to me is he spoke about when he got started in music, he was always playing instruments his whole life, piano, guitar, everything. And he didn't wait until he had a pristine piano. He didn't wait until he had a pristine guitar. I believe he said his dad ran maintenance or something like that in an old folks home or a retirement place. So whenever somebody would pass away, I believe he said his dad would be able to take home, some of the belongings or something like that. I might be misquoting it. But he would get old instruments and stuff like that. And when he kind of fell in love with music and he decided that he wanted to start making music, he didn't have the equipment. Equipment's expensive to produce music. I'm not sure how that process works, but from what I remember from the podcast, he would say that he didn't have the money for the equipment. So if he wanted to produce music, he would record on cassette. If you don't know what cassettes are, you might have to look that up. He would record, let's say, the guitar riffs or the guitar portion. He would record that on a tape recorder, and then he would have a second tape recorder, and he would play the guitar portion on one recorder, and then he would record himself playing the drums, or record himself playing bass, or record himself singing. So you would have multiple tape recorders going at once, and the end product would be, whether it's the singing or the bass or whatever it was. So you have multiple tape recorders playing. So you would have him playing guitar on one tape recorder, him playing drums on one tape recorder, and then he would be recording himself singing or whatever it was while recording all of it together. I know that sounds confusing, but I know there is this expensive equipment that will help you mix everything together so you don't have to do all those things at once. But he loved music. He had such a passion for music. He just wanted to create music. He didn't care that he didn't have the expensive equipment. He went through these painstaking processes of doing in 4 or 5 steps what a mixer could do in one. But he didn't care. He just wanted to make music. And then he just, as he got older and as he progressed, he was able to acquire better equipment. But the fact that he didn't have the expensive equipment didn't stop him from producing music. And there's this same parallel to powerlifting, to where some lifters, they don't care if they have the equipment, the gym. They have a passion for training and getting stronger, so they will train out of their garage with a barbell, and they find a way to squat, bench, and deadlift with just a barbell and some weights. because they have that passion. And as the years go by, as they can afford better equipment, or they can afford a better gym membership, or they can afford to drive to a gym, that's just secondary. All that stuff comes as you get better, as you acquire more equipment or finances. It doesn't stop them from becoming power, because the passion is there first. There's a lot of people who aspire to be powerlifters or weightlifters or strongman or bodybuilders, and if they don't have the best gym, if they don't have access to the best equipment, they just don't even do it. They don't see the worth in doing it if they can't have all these things, if they can't have the $130 Oli shoes, if they can't have a $300 SBD belt, or if in their minds, that's what lifting is. Having all of that junk is what makes you a power lifter or a weightlifter or whatever. But what you can take from Frankie's example is that he didn't need the accessories. He didn't need the resources. He had passion, and he built from passion. His foundation was built from passion. And as he went along and got better, then he sort of added the things necessary. But if he would have just sat in his basement and thought, well, I don't have the expensive mixing equipment, so therefore I can't be a musician, then he wouldn't be the amazing musician and have the career that he has today because of that beginning. So you don't need the equipment. You don't need the fancy gym. You don't need the fancy resources. All you need is a passion in what you're doing. And if you have passion for something, you will find yourself a way to move up, to proceed, to get better. So that was one thing that stood out to me right in my face. And the other part was, I think Frankie's older than me. I think Frankie's in his mid 40s. I could be wrong. No offense, Frankie. But now he has, an amazing job in these historical venues in the Boston area, I believe. He runs sound for these places and venues where musicians and artists and all sorts of things come through, and he's the sound guy, from what I gathered from his podcast. And he's also one of those crazy motherfuckers that will go up on the beams and the rafters 4, 5, 6 stories up in the air, and he'll put pictures on his Instagram of him eating fucking lunch while he's sitting on a beam that's, a foot across, and he just got a safety harness, and that's all he needs. And you look straight down, and it's a 4 or 5 story drop, 6 story drop, and he's just chilling up there. But the second thing that really stood out to me is the reason why he was able to get this amazing job that he has, working with the most famous rock stars, the most famous entertainers, doing sound for them, doing sound for their buildings, is because from a very young age, he learned as he went along. His experience is what made him better than a lot of people who just come out of college or come out of school with the education but no experience. He says all the time he has these kids who come out of school or college or whatever the process is, whether it's, I don't know how you get to be a musician or a studio person or a mixer. I don't know what that process, I don't know if there's colleges for that. But he said kids will come out with no experience, but they have all of this education, and they try to produce music, they try to produce sound with no experience. It's almost like when engineers and the actual construction workers butt heads, because the engineers will try to say, no, I did it all on my computer, this is how it has to be. And then the construction workers who actually do the work, they'll tell them, this does not make sense. This does not apply to the real world. Just because you can make that on your computer doesn't mean that this is what we can do in real life. So you have all these kids who come out of their education with no experience, and they try to work with him, create music, create sound, and it just does not apply to the real world. And because they have no actual experience doing it themselves, no experience in the music industry, it just doesn't apply. And it just goes to show you, if you were an aspiring coach, and this is where I'm going with this part of it, if you're an aspiring coach and you want to help people, and you have the education, you have the certs, you have all these shiny things on paper that say you know what you're doing. If you don't have any actual time in the trenches, if you haven't spent 5, 10, 15 years learning how to do it yourself, then that education with lack of experience does not apply to the real world. I myself am doing it in reverse. I have 17 years of experience, but now for the last year and a half, 2 years, I'm adding the education to it, because I understand that you can't be unidimensional. It can't just be, oh, I have 17 years of experience, that means I'm going to know how to program. It means that I'm going to know how to program for myself or anybody who is similar to me and might have the same experiences. Yeah, I might be able to program for them too. But when you have people coming out of the woodwork who present different challenges than you've seen, that is where you can fall back on education, because you have this big, broad range of different ways to train people, different philosophies, other than the ones you just built on your own. So the point of that is, you can't be unidimensional. You can't just come into it with 20 years of experience with no education and think that you're going to have a firm grasp on how to train people, and vice versa. If you come into it with a 4-year degree or 5-year degree or whatever, then you have all these certs and diplomas and all this stuff, but you've never put in the time with yourself, you're not going to be able to help people the best of your ability. You're never going to be as good as people who have both experience and education. So those are two of the things that I got out of Frankie's podcast. It was really cool. I didn't know much about Frankie's history, and just to hear where he came from, where he started, where he's at now, it's just really cool, really inspiring. And I thank you, Frankie, for putting that podcast out there, because it gives so much perspective to, it's so many parallels to powerlifting and training and strength training and being a coach. Passion is your foundation. Passion is your cornerstone. Education and experience have to be equal, or if not, relatively close. It's very hard to do anything with one or the other. So passion, foundation, and balance between education and experience, and you'll go very far.